Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about all the upsets, or at least close upsets, like Clemson, Troy, Syracuse over UConn. It was a weird weekend, and it was to be expected with a lot of people telling you it was a sleepy weekend. That is never the case in college football, but let's get into a little bit of a weekend whip around, a couple of games that I just wanted to touch on here for a second because there were a lot of really great ones. And we'll go back to Friday night to start off this. Louisville gets a big time win over JMU 28-14, one that they absolutely needed and one that did not look like it was in hand until very late when Isaac Brown went 78 yards for a touchdown with about 3.5 minutes left to put the nail in the coffin. But JMU missed a couple of chances early. There were definitely some big time chances to go up by more than 7-6 going into halftime, to not allow Louisville to get two big field goals at the end of the half and put themselves in a really good position. Moving forward, JMU missed a couple of shots. There's no doubt about that. The two quarterback system is really fun. There's no doubt about that. They have a lot of different packages they can throw at you. Alonzo Barnett and Matthew Sluka make things really hard for defenses. So I don't think they have to change the approach too much. I just think you were in a position where if you let Louisville hang around, number one was going to make a play. And that's exactly what happened. Isaac Brown was the best player on the field, and he proved that. He was an incredible player and made the biggest play of the day. There's no doubt about that. But if you're Louisville, you needed this one. It was going to be put you in a very bad position going into the ACC, especially with all the relatively new quote-unquote hurdles like Miami, like Florida State, which you knew were going to be tough, but you didn't know were going to be this tough. Now you're in a position where you have to be really good the rest of the way. The run game has to be maybe more consistent, I should say. Not necessarily better. I think they put up overall good numbers, but a little bit more consistent, a little bit more lean on them mentality, and the pass game has to get a little bit better. I think they have the guys. I think Chris Bell is going to be a great player. If you can't get only chunk plays, I guess is the best way to put it. You have to find a way to get those boring 3-4 yard carries that really win you football games. For JMU, you got a couple of tough games coming forward. That being said, you're in a position where you can run the table in the Sun Belt. You can give yourself the ability to win the Sun Belt. We've talked about it earlier. I don't know if the Sun Belt gets a ton of respect. So among the Tulane, USF, JMU, do they stand out enough among those American teams? Do those American teams slip up maybe a couple of times to give JMU a little bit of an opening? That's probably what's going to happen, if I'm being totally honest. I like this JMU team. I think they have the ability to run the table the rest of the way and get a couple of things to break their way, but not the result that you wanted. Definitely one that if JMU was able to win, we're probably talking about them and South Florida being the teams that are defining the G5 race. Now it's pretty much South Florida with just about everyone else trying to vie for number 2. So it is going to be interesting to watch that unfold. I think JMU has all the ability in the world. Got to clean up some things, and for Louisville, you're still firmly in the mix. You got a win that you absolutely needed. Definitely some consistency things offensively that you're going to want to clean up. Illinois got a win 45-19 over Duke. It was 14-13 at halftime. I don't know what happened in this game. If I'm being totally honest, I knew Illinois was up, I believe, 32-19 or 31-19, if I'm not mistaken, and I kind of flipped it off, or at least I turned my attention elsewhere. They outscored Duke 31-6 in the second half, 17-0 in the fourth. It was tough. And frankly, I was talking about it going into this game, that does Illinois have that wide receiver one? Can they get that guy to make number of plays throughout this game? Hank Beatty made a number of plays. He had over 100 yards. Altmaier had over 303 touchdowns through the air. It was an incredibly good performance from this Illinois football team, and it was a game that I think could have gotten really sketchy. And Darian Mensah on the other side could have made it probably more sketchy than he did, but Illinois did a great job. They totally manhandled that offensive line, made Darian Mensah not comfortable pretty much from the jump, and you were in a position where he missed a couple of balls. Now, the Duke wide receivers dropped a couple of balls that they probably should have caught, but at the end of the day, a huge win for Illinois. They get Indiana in 2 weeks. They got to be able to win that game. If they find a way to win that game, Illinois is firmly in the mix for the CFP. I believe they sit somewhere around 8, I believe, in the new AP poll. So I think you're in a position where you win that game in 2 weeks against Indiana, you are off to the races and firmly in the mix for a CFP. For Duke, I wasn't necessarily buying a ton of Duke stock. The schedule is still in a position where they can make a run in the ACC. Got to get a number of things cleaned up defensively. Baylor gets a win in double overtime over SMU, 48-45. This one was weird. Another one that I don't want to say I wasn't, totally watching. I wasn't paying full attention. I'll be totally honest. 2 scores in the final 5:23 in this game. Sawyer Robertson continues to put on a show. He put up 440 and 4 touchdowns in this game. if you're buying a Heisman ticket right now, would not be the worst thing to throw a little bit of money there because they're needing this kid. I think they ran the ball better in this game. They're probably going to need this kid to make a number of big-time plays, especially because the defense leaves quite a bit to be desired. There's no doubt about that. Tough loss for SMU. The defense has to turn a corner there as well, obviously. You get TCU in 2 weeks, and if they don't turn a corner defensively, they're probably going to do what they did in North Carolina to you. So got to be very careful. Then they still get at Clemson, at Miami. To say I don't think I don't think SMU is going to make the CFP again. I don't think it's going to happen. I think it's a good team that continues to build under Rhett Lashlee, maybe under Rhett Lashlee. Something to talk about later in the season, but you got a lot of things to figure out. There's no doubt about that. You're going into a conference schedule that is not quite as kind as it was a year ago. So going to have to clean up some things. We'll see if SMU can do that. For Baylor, you're in a good position. You got to get the defense in order. There's no doubt about that. You have Arizona State at home in 2 weeks. You win that game, and you're firmly in the mix in the Big 12, and you've put yourself in a position where you probably knocked out Arizona State from the Big 12 conversation, and you put yourself firmly at the top. NC State 35, Virginia 31. This was somehow an out-of-conference game. Very weird set of circumstances with the new conference realignment that knocked this game off the schedule for both them. They wanted to play it. They said they would play it out-of-conference. Very weird, but at the end of the day, was a very, very fun game. It was back and forth pretty much until the fourth when no one could get anything done. Virginia found a way down the field time and time again, but missed a field goal. Had a turnover downs on the NC State 8-yard line, and then had an INT that was thrown into the NC State end zone. It was a tough finish for Virginia. It was a tough finish to this game, and NC State found a way to make the plays when they needed to. It was not all that pretty in a number of ways for these defenses, but I think both these teams are in a very interesting position. I think Virginia's schedule puts them in a place where maybe you get a couple of wins. Maybe you get the ball rolling downhill, and this not being a conference game really comes back to help you towards the end of the season. Maybe NC State finds a way to upset a couple of teams. CJ Bailey puts together another great performance moving forward, and you have a dangerous team up there in Raleigh. So it'll be really interesting to watch these two teams go about business. I don't think they're going to factor too much into the ACC conversation, but neither of them got hurt this weekend, at least in the ACC. Tulane 31, South Alabama 30. Tulane 33, South Alabama 31. This was a weird game. Tulane falls down 14-0 early in this one. Then they outscore South Alabama 33-3 for the vast majority of this game. And then South Alabama finds two scores late. It comes down to a 2-point conversion stop from Tulane to win this one. It was not all that pretty. You found a way to win the game. And I think that makes sense. You had a game last week against Northwestern that you were very excited for. You have a game next week where Darian Mensah, the guy that left you, comes to town. It makes sense that this one was a little bit of a dip, a little bit of a weird performance, a little bit of we're up, 33-17. Let's take our foot off the gas. Let's be able to win this game. Didn't work out that way, all that pretty, but you find a way to win. You got Duke at home, then you have at Ole Miss. You win one of those, you're in a position to meet South Florida, especially if they are pretty much only if they lose to Miami. But you're in a position where you're at least on relative even footing. It is not going to be perfectly even footing. I still think South Florida would have a little bit of an edge above you, but you'd have the ability to beat them later in the season in the American title, and it could just be for a CFP spot. It could just be those two teams going at it, being the top two teams in the Group of 5 conversation. Whoever wins it goes to the CFP. I could very well see that being the case, and Tulane kept themselves alive at the very least this Saturday. Michigan State wins a big one, 42-40 over Boston College. Realize I have the score wrong there, apologies, but it was 42-41, a great quarterback matchup in this one that I knew was underrated going into this weekend, but Dylan Lonergan puts up almost 400 yards, 4 scores through the air. Aiden Childs puts up 231 through the air, 4 scores, and then another one on the ground. It was a special game where Michigan State made just one more play. That was about it. I don't think Boston College is going to make a ton of noise this year. I can promise you they're going to be a team to watch in 2026. They are a dangerous team with a quarterback that fully understands that system, that's very comfortable in it, and can rip the ball around the yard. For Michigan State, it's a tough Big Ten schedule. It was always going to be tough. It's always going to be tough for Michigan State. That's the reality of a lot of the rivalries that they have up there. But it's a fun team. There's no doubt about that. They continue to move forward. They continue to progress. Need to get a little bit more out of that defense moving forward, but absolutely have the ability to maybe shock some people throughout this year. Vanderbilt 44, Virginia Tech 20. What happened in this second half? Vanderbilt outscored them 34-0 in the second half, outgains Virginia Tech by over 300 yards. It was bad. It was abuse of the highest order in the second half of this game. Diego Pavia even threw a lead block on a run. It was wild stuff. But Vandy scored in every single drive in the second half. They're a good football team. They're far from perfect. I don't know why they're not ranked, if I'm being totally honest. It's absolutely crazy what the AP poll is this week, but I'll go ahead and leave that rant to the side for the time being. Vanderbilt has a huge one this weekend against South Carolina. If they find a way to win that one, and they just beat a team at home a little bit worse than South Carolina beat them in a neutral field, if they find a way to win that game, this Vandy team gets really interesting in a hurry. Now, I was talking a little bit down on Vanderbilt into this season. Kind of apologize for doing that. If I'm being totally honest, they are a dangerous team. If they go 5-0, or if they find a way to win that South Carolina game, they probably will be 5-0 going into that Bama game. Gives them the spot to do something really special. I don't necessarily think they will. I'm still very skeptical, but at the end of the day, this is a top 20 team in my mind, at least as of right this second. Virginia Tech is in a really tough spot moving forward. I'll just tell you that right now. The ACC slate is not terrible, but not necessarily easy for them, and they're in a position where you probably couldn't lose these two games. You probably had to go 1-1, you went 0-2, and now you're in a really bad spot moving forward. And then the abuse that happened up in Eugene, Oregon. Oregon 69, Oklahoma State 3. Oregon looks really good, guys, and it's something that I probably should have expected coming into the season. Oklahoma State looks upsettingly bad thus far, if I'm being totally honest. It is incredible what this Oregon team is capable of. It is incredible what Dan Lanning is capable of if you start talking crap to him. Stop. Stop saying things about Dan Lanning, about his program, about his pocketbook before you show up to Eugene. He is going to stomp you into the ground. He's going to smile at you while doing it. It is a very bad idea to attack Dan Lanning. He is going to come out firing. The team said as much at the end of the game. Dante Moore said as much. He said, "You're essentially coming after one of our own. You're coming after our guy. We're going to tear you to pieces." That's exactly what they did. In Oklahoma State, there was nothing to be done in this game, if I'm being totally honest. There were a number of things that hypothetically you could have done, I suppose. It wasn't going to matter. Oregon was going to dominate you in this game, and they did from start to finish. It was ugly. Oregon moves forward at Northwestern this weekend. Oregon State before a Penn State game. They should be undefeated going into that matchup. It should be the game of the week. It should maybe be the game of the year. It'll be incredible to watch what this Oregon team is capable of on the road in a much bigger moment, a much bigger spot. I want to talk about De'Corian Moore here for a second. Incredible player. A guy that will be firmly in the mix for the Biletnikoff over the next 3 years, including this one. He's a special player that they knew they were going to need at the beginning of the season when Evan Stewart went down. He answered the bell. He's been an incredible, incredible player for this football team. He will continue to be so. If I had to imagine for Oklahoma State, I don't know what you do. I think you ride out this season. You see what happens at the end. Probably something that looks a little bit like mutually parting ways. I hate to say it. I think Mike Gundy's done an incredible job over there at Oklahoma State. Probably time to move forward, if I'm being totally honest. We'll see how that unfolds. Obviously, Mike Gundy will be handled very, very carefully there and very fairly there because he's done incredible things for that university, but it might be going out with a whimper, if I'm being totally honest. But overall, a lot of incredible games this past weekend. We also had Toledo get a massive win over Western Kentucky. Needed that one in a big way. But we move forward. We have one more segment here, winners and losers from this past weekend. We'll get into it all. The SEC, despite the Florida win, kind of won this past weekend. The ACC badly lost it. And we'll talk about it all right after this, so stick with us.